After years of being deaf, I got my hearing back, but decided not to tell my son at first. Eleanor Matthews never imagined that the gift of restored hearing would become the key to uncovering her family's darkest betrayal. What she discovered in the silence they thought protected them would change everything forever. At 64, Eleanor Matthews had lived in silence for 12 years, navigating her world through vibrations, visual cues, and the gentle guidance of her housekeeper Rosa. Her deafness, caused by a rare autoimmune condition, had isolated her from the musical world she once loved. But it had also taught her to observe people in ways that hearing never could. This is the story of how silence became the greatest teacher, how betrayal led to unexpected liberation, and how a woman who had lost one of her most precious senses discovered that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who truly loves you, because the truth has a sound all its own. But to understand how Eleanor's restored hearing would expose a conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight, we need to go back to the day everything changed, and the health crisis that made her decision even more urgent. Eleanor's home on Chicago's prestigious Lakeshore Drive was a testament to a lifetime of careful financial planning and her late husband Robert's success as a classical music conductor. The three-story limestone mansion overlooked Lake Michigan, its rooms filled with instruments, sheet music, and memories of the musical soirees that had once made it the heart of Chicago's cultural scene. Since her deafness began 12 years ago, the house had become quieter, the grand piano in the living room sitting silent like a monument to all she had lost. Eleanor had adapted to her world of silence with remarkable grace, learning to read lips, communicate through sign language, and navigate social situations with the help of Rosa, her devoted housekeeper, who had become her closest companion. The year was 2023, and advances in medical technology were offering new hope for conditions that had once been considered permanent. But Eleanor's time was running out in ways that had nothing to do with her hearing. Her doctors had recently discovered early signs of Parkinson's disease, which would eventually rob her of the fine motor control needed to play piano. Eleanor had been a professional pianist before marrying Robert Matthews, a renowned conductor with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Together they had built a life centered around music, hosting intimate concerts in their home, and supporting young musicians through scholarships and mentorship. When Robert died of cancer 8 years ago, Eleanor had already been deaf for 4 years, unable to hear his final words or the music they had shared for 35 years of marriage. The loss of both her husband and her hearing had created a double grief that she was still processing, complicated by the knowledge that her musical legacy was slowly being forgotten. Living alone, except for Rosa's daily presence, Eleanor had created a structured life that accommodated her deafness while managing her substantial inheritance from Robert. She continued their tradition of supporting young musicians through the Matthews Foundation, but her inability to hear performances had made her feel increasingly disconnected from the musical world she had once inhabited. Her relationship with Nathan had become strained since Robert's death, complicated by his wife, Victoria's obvious discomfort with Eleanor's disability, and her own growing health concerns. The recent Parkinson's diagnosis had added urgency to her desire to reconnect with music and secure her legacy. Eleanor's deafness had sharpened her other senses dramatically. She could read micro-expressions, body language, and emotional undercurrents with uncanny accuracy. Her visual memory was exceptional, and she had developed an intuitive understanding of people's true feelings that often surprised those who underestimated her because of her disability. Eleanor possessed a quiet strength that had helped her survive both personal loss and physical limitation. But she also carried the weight of knowing that her time to make music was limited. Her hands were already showing the subtle tremors that would eventually end her playing career, making her restored hearing both a gift and a race against time. Eleanor's central conflict wasn't just about her deafness. It was about the growing sense that she was becoming invisible in her own life. while her musical legacy was being erased. Since Robert's death, she had felt increasingly isolated, not just by her hearing loss, but by the subtle ways that people treated her differently. The recent Parkinson's diagnosis had intensified her urgency to reconnect with music and ensure that her contributions to the musical world would be remembered. The stakes were enormous, not just her physical hearing, but her place in the world, her relationships with the people she loved most, and the preservation of a musical legacy that had taken decades to build. Eleanor feared that her deafness was being used as an excuse to diminish her agency and independence, while her deteriorating health meant that time was running out to reclaim what she had lost. The question wasn't just whether she could hear again, but whether she could use that hearing to protect everything she had built before it was too late. When Dr. Sarah Chen at Northwestern Medical Institute called with news about an experimental procedure that could restore Eleanor's hearing, she had no idea that the gift of sound would come with the burden of truth, and that an old friend would complicate everything. The letter from Northwestern Medical Institute arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, the same day Eleanor received devastating news from her neurologist about the progression of her Parkinson's disease. Rosa brought both pieces of mail to Eleanor, with the morning coffee her face a mixture of excitement and concern. Eleanor's hands trembled not from nerves, but from the subtle tremors that had begun 3 months earlier, as she read Dr. Sarah Chen's carefully worded explanation of the experimental neural implant procedure. The technology has advanced significantly in the past 2 years, Dr. Chen explained during their consultation, speaking clearly so Eleanor could read her lips. Your type of hearing loss, autoimmune-related damage to the cochlear nerve, is ideal for this procedure. We can bypass the damaged areas and create direct neural pathways to the auditory cortex. Eleanor felt a flutter of hope that she hadn't experienced in years, but it was tempered by the knowledge that her time was limited. How long would recovery take? She asked, thinking of her deteriorating motor control. Full recovery is typically 6 to 8 weeks, Dr. Chen replied, but you should be able to hear within days of activation. Eleanor realized that if she was going to hear music again, if she was going to play piano one more time, this might be her only chance. The surgery was scheduled for a Friday morning, but Eleanor's decision to keep it secret from Nathan and Victoria was complicated by an unexpected visitor. Marcus Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, had been Robert's former protege and Eleanor's star piano student 20 years earlier. Now a successful concert pianist, Marcus had returned to Chicago for a performance and wanted to visit his former teacher. I've been thinking about the Chopin ballade you taught me, Marcus said, his hands moving expressively as he spoke. Eleanor read his lips carefully, remembering the passionate young man who had once filled her home with music. I'm performing it next week, and I wanted to thank you for everything you taught me about interpreting the emotional landscape of the piece. Eleanor felt a pang of loss, knowing that she couldn't hear Marcus play, couldn't share in the musical conversation that had once been the foundation of their relationship. But she also felt a spark of determination. If the surgery worked, she might be able to hear Marcus perform, again might be able to return to the musical world that had been her life's work. I would love to hear you play again. Eleanor said the words, carrying more weight than Marcus could know. Perhaps, after next week, we could arrange something. Marcus smiled, unaware that Eleanor was planning to surprise him with her restored hearing. I'd like that very much. Music has always been our language, hasn't it? The surgery was successful, but Eleanor's first experience with restored hearing was overwhelming beyond anything she had imagined. When Dr. Chen activated the implant, a week later, the rush of sound was almost unbearable. Every footstep echoed like thunder. Every breath seemed amplified. Every mechanical hum in the hospital created a symphony of noise that made her head spin. This is normal, Dr. Chen assured her as Eleanor covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. Your brain needs time to relearn how to process sound. The neural pathways are rebuilding themselves, creating new connections. It will take several weeks for everything to normalize. Eleanor's first clear sound was Rosa's voice saying her name, the familiar accent now carrying warmth and music that Eleanor had forgotten existed. After 12 years of silence, hearing her friend's voice was like receiving a gift she had forgotten she wanted. But it was the sound of her own breathing, her own heartbeat, the rustle of her clothes as she moved that truly amazed her. She had forgotten that the world was full of sound, that silence was actually rare and precious. Every step on the hospital floor created a small percussion symphony. Every door closing was a gentle timpani beat. Eleanor's decision to keep her restored hearing secret would soon reveal truths about her family that she never could have imagined, and force her to confront the possibility that her deafness had been hiding more than just sound. Eleanor's first week with restored hearing was a symphony of rediscovery. The morning birds outside her window created a chorus that brought tears to her eyes. She had forgotten that dawn had its own music. Water running from the faucet sounded like a gentle stream, and her own footsteps on the hardwood floors created rhythmic patterns that reminded her of percussion exercises. But she was careful to maintain the appearance of deafness around Nathan and Victoria, responding only to visual cues and continuing to use sign language with Rosa when others were present. During Nathan's first visit after her surgery, Eleanor noticed him speaking in hushed tones to Victoria in the hallway, their conversation stopping abruptly when Eleanor appeared. Her restored hearing picked up fragments that chilled her, timeline accelerating, property appraisal. Before she gets worse, the second week brought more disturbing revelations and a complication Eleanor hadn't anticipated. Marcus Chen called to arrange a private concert for her, unaware that she could now hear. Meanwhile, Eleanor began positioning herself where she could overhear Nathan and Victoria's conversations. Using her supposed deafness as cover, she heard Nathan on the phone discussing the Lakeshore property and getting the papers signed before the Parkinson's affects her judgment. Victoria's voice was clearer now, and Eleanor caught her saying, "The tremors are getting worse. We need to move faster before she realizes what's happening." Eleanor's heart sank as she realized they were using both her deafness and her Parkinson's diagnosis as justification for taking control of her life. By the third week, Eleanor had heard enough to understand the scope of their deception. But she also faced a moral dilemma about Marcus's planned visit. Nathan and Victoria were planning to sell her home and her summer cottage, apparently believing they could manipulate her into signing documents she couldn't fully understand. Eleanor began documenting everything she heard, writing detailed notes about conversations, phone calls, and meetings. She also started paying closer attention to her financial statements, noticing discrepancies that she had previously attributed to Nathan's help. The pattern was clear. They were systematically positioning themselves to control her assets while she still had time to stop them. Eleanor's restored hearing allowed her to witness Nathan's private moments of doubt and self-recrimination. Late one evening, she heard him on the phone with someone, perhaps a therapist or close friend, revealing the complexity of his motivations. "I know what we're doing is wrong," Nathan said, his voice heavy with guilt. "But you don't understand what it was like growing up with her. She was always perfect, the perfect pianist, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I played piano, she corrected every mistake. When I chose music education instead of performance, she was disappointed. When I married Victoria, she made it clear that Victoria wasn't sophisticated enough for the family." Eleanor felt a stab of pain, recognizing the truth in his words. She had been demanding, had expected excellence, because she had achieved it herself. "And now she's sick," Nathan continued. "The Parkinson's is going to get worse, and she'll need care that costs a fortune. Victoria and I can't afford that kind of expense. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left when she really needs it." Eleanor realized that Nathan's betrayal was rooted in genuine fear and resentment that had been building for decades. He wasn't just stealing from her, he was trying to solve problems that felt insurmountable while settling old scores from childhood. Victoria's character revealed itself through a conversation Eleanor overheard between Victoria and her sister on the phone. The discussion exposed motivations that went beyond simple greed. "I can't keep doing this, Maria," Victoria said, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Eleanor looks at me like I'm some kind of interloper who stole her precious son. She's never accepted me, never treated me like family. And now, with her getting sicker, Nathan expects me to become her caregiver while she treats me like hired help." Eleanor felt a shock of recognition. Victoria's resentment wasn't just about money. It was about years of feeling excluded and undervalued. "She has this way of making you feel small," Victoria continued. "Like you're not cultured enough, not refined enough. She speaks to Rosa with more warmth than she's ever shown me. And Nathan doesn't see it because he's so busy trying to win her approval that he can't see how she treats his wife." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "I know taking her money is wrong, but I'm tired of feeling like a servant in her house. If we're going to be responsible for her care, if we're going to sacrifice our lives to take care of her, then we deserve to be compensated for it." Eleanor realized that Victoria's actions were driven by a toxic combination of resentment, fear, and the desire for recognition that Eleanor had never provided. Eleanor's investigation revealed that the financial manipulation had been going on for months, but it also uncovered a more immediate threat. Nathan and Victoria had scheduled a meeting with a conservatorship attorney for the following week, planning to have Eleanor declared legally incompetent due to her combined disabilities. The most devastating discovery came when Eleanor found a copy of a psychiatric evaluation that Nathan had commissioned, claiming that her deafness and Parkinson's disease had led to cognitive decline and social isolation that made her incapable of managing her own affairs. The evaluation, conducted by a Dr. Eleanor, had never met recommended immediate guardianship. But Eleanor also learned that Marcus Chen had been trying to organize a tribute concert in her honor, featuring her former students and colleagues performing pieces she had taught them. The concert was scheduled for the same week as the conservatorship hearing, creating a symbolic collision between Eleanor's musical legacy and her family's betrayal. Eleanor realized that Nathan and Victoria weren't just planning to control her finances, they were planning to erase her from her own life. The timeline was accelerating because they knew her Parkinson's would eventually make their case stronger, but they also knew that her musical community still valued her contributions. Eleanor's discovery of the conservatorship plan would force her to make a choice that would define the rest of her life and determine whether she would remain a victim of her family's manipulation or reclaim her power in a way that would shock everyone. The crisis came to a head on a Thursday afternoon when Nathan and Victoria arrived at Eleanor's home with a briefcase full of documents, a notary public, and Dr. Patricia Hoffman, the psychiatrist, who had evaluated Eleanor without her knowledge. Eleanor, pretending to be deaf, watched through the security monitor as they approached with the confident stride of people who believed they were about to complete a successful deception. "Mother, we have some important papers for you to sign," Nathan said as Eleanor opened the door, his voice carrying the patronizing tone she had grown to despise. "Dr. Hoffman is here to help explain everything and make sure you understand what's best for your care." Eleanor nodded and smiled, playing the role of the trusting disabled mother while her heart pounded with anger and betrayal. She led them to the living room, where the recording device was hidden, and sat in her usual chair as Nathan spread the documents across the coffee table. Dr. Hoffman spoke with the artificial kindness that Eleanor recognized from years of dealing with medical professionals who assumed disability meant diminished intelligence. "Mrs. Matthews, your son is concerned about your ability to manage your complex financial affairs, especially with your progressing Parkinson's disease. These documents will ensure you receive the best possible care." Eleanor pretended to study the papers, knowing that Thomas Ellery, her attorney, had already reviewed copies. and confirmed her worst fears. The conservatorship papers would give Nathan complete control over her finances, authorize the sale of her properties, and place her in a memory care facility where she would have no independence or autonomy. We've also arranged for your piano to be donated to the music school. Victoria added her voice, carrying false sweetness. Since you can't play anymore, it seems wasteful to keep it. The mention of her piano triggered something in Eleanor that went beyond anger. It was a primal need to protect the last connection to her musical identity. Her hands began to tremble more noticeably, not from Parkinson's, but from the effort of controlling her rage. The tremors are getting worse, Dr. Hoffman observed, making notes on her clipboard. This supports our assessment that Mrs. Matthews needs immediate supervised care. The combination of hearing loss and progressive neurological disease creates a dangerous situation for independent living. Eleanor realized that her Parkinson's diagnosis was being weaponized against her, used as evidence of incompetence, rather than a medical condition she was managing successfully. The irony was bitter. She had more clarity of mind now than she'd had in years, but her physical symptoms were being used to justify taking away her mental autonomy. The sooner we can get these documents signed, the sooner we can begin the transition to appropriate care. Dr. Hoffman continued, I understand there's a very nice facility in Evanston that specializes in patients with your particular combination of challenges. Eleanor felt the walls closing in around her. They weren't just planning to steal her money, they were planning to erase her existence, to reduce her to a collection of symptoms and disabilities that justified their control. Eleanor looked at the documents in front of her, then at Nathan and Victoria's expectant faces, and made a decision that would change all their lives forever. She stood up slowly, walked to the piano, and began to play. The sound of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. Eleanor's fingers moving with the skill and emotion that had made her a professional pianist decades earlier. The tremors in her hands seemed to disappear as muscle memory took over her fingers, finding the keys with the precision that had defined her career. Nathan and Victoria froze their faces, shifting from confusion to shock to horror as they realized what Eleanor's playing meant. Dr. Hoffman's clipboard clattered to the floor as she stared at Eleanor in disbelief. That's beautiful, isn't it? Eleanor said, her voice clear and strong as she continued playing. I haven't been able to hear music for 12 years, but 3 weeks ago, I had surgery to restore my hearing. I can hear everything now, Nathan, everything. The music swelled, filling the room with beauty that contrasted sharply with the ugliness of the situation. Eleanor's playing was infused with 12 years of silence, with the pain of loss and the joy of rediscovery, with the anger of betrayal and the strength of survival. I can hear the birds singing outside my window. Eleanor continued, her hands dancing across the keys. I can hear the lake lapping against the shore. I can hear Rosa humming in the kitchen. And I can hear every cruel word you've spoken about me, every lie you've told, every plan you've made to steal my life away from me. The music stopped, and the silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's revelation would force Nathan and Victoria to confront the consequences of their betrayal, but it would also give Eleanor the opportunity to reclaim not just her hearing, but her entire life. In the tense silence that followed Eleanor's revelation, the doorbell rang. Eleanor smiled as she walked to answer it, knowing that Thomas Ellery would be standing there with the documents that would change everything. But she had also invited Marcus Chen, who arrived carrying his violin case. Nathan, Victoria, Dr. Hoffman, I'd like you to meet my attorney, Thomas Ellery, and my former student, Marcus Chen, Eleanor said as she returned to the living room. Thomas, these are the people I told you about, the ones who have been trying to have me declared incompetent. Marcus, these are the family members who were planning to donate my piano to charity because they assumed I could no longer play. Marcus's face showed confusion and then anger as he understood the situation. Eleanor, you didn't tell me you could hear again. This is wonderful news, and you're playing beautifully. Your technique is as flawless as ever. Thomas's presence transformed the dynamic in the room, but Marcus's genuine joy at Eleanor's recovery highlighted the contrast between those who truly cared about her and those who saw her as a burden. Mrs. Matthews has asked me to inform you that she is revoking any power of attorney arrangements and will be pressing charges for attempted financial elder abuse, Thomas said formally. Dr. Hoffman attempted to salvage the situation. Mrs. Matthews, regardless of your hearing status, your Parkinson's disease still presents significant challenges for independent living. The tremors, the potential for cognitive decline. My tremors disappear when I play piano. Eleanor interrupted, demonstrating by playing a complex passage from Bach. My cognitive function is excellent, as evidenced by my ability to detect and document your conspiracy. And my Parkinson's is being managed successfully by my actual doctor, not someone who evaluated me without my knowledge or consent. Marcus stepped forward, his protective instincts activated. Eleanor, I had no idea you were dealing with this, but I want you to know that the musical community hasn't forgotten you. We've been planning a tribute concert to honor your contributions to music education. Your former students want to perform pieces you taught them. Nathan's composure finally cracked. A tribute concert, Mother. You can't possibly think you can still perform publicly. The Parkinson's, the years of not playing. Eleanor's response was to begin playing Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and passion, proving that her musical abilities were not only intact but enhanced by her restored hearing. Eleanor's performance of the Liszt piece was a declaration of war against those who had underestimated her. The music filled the room with power and defiance, each note a refutation of their claims about her incompetence. When she finished, the silence was profound. This is what you tried to take from me. Eleanor said, her hands still resting on the keys. Not just my money or my house, but my identity, my dignity, my right to make my own decisions about my life. You used my deafness as a weapon against me, and you forgot that I'm still the woman who taught Marcus to play, who built a musical legacy that will outlast all of us. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. Eleanor, that was extraordinary. Your interpretation has deepened. There's an emotional complexity there that comes from everything you've survived. Dr. Hoffman gathered her papers hastily. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll need to review my assessment in light of this new information. There's no misunderstanding, Eleanor replied firmly. You evaluated me without my knowledge, declared me incompetent without meeting me, and participated in a conspiracy to steal my assets. That's not medicine, that's fraud. Nathan slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions finally hitting him. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared about the future, about taking care of you, about the medical expenses. I remembered how demanding you were when I was growing up, how nothing I did was ever good enough, and I thought this was the only way to protect myself. Eleanor's anger softened slightly as she heard the pain in Nathan's voice. Nathan, I know I wasn't an easy mother. I expected excellence because I achieved it myself, and I didn't understand that my standards were crushing you. But that doesn't justify what you've done. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Eleanor, if you do this, if you cut Nathan out of your will, you'll be alone. We're your family. Who will take care of you when the Parkinson's gets worse? I'd rather be alone with my dignity than surrounded by people who see me as a burden, Eleanor replied. And I won't be alone. I have Rosa. I have Marcus. I have my musical community. I have people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Marcus stepped forward, his violin case in hand. Eleanor, would you accompany me? I'd like to play the piece we worked on 20 years ago, the one you said taught me about finding hope in darkness. Eleanor nodded her fingers, finding the opening chords of Brahms' Violin Sonata No. 1. As Marcus lifted his violin, the room filled with music that spoke of partnership, of teacher and student, of the bonds that transcend family obligation. Nathan watched his mother and Marcus play together, seeing a side of Eleanor that he had forgotten existed. The passionate musician, the dedicated teacher, the woman who had devoted her life to nurturing talent in others. For the first time, he understood what he had been trying to destroy. "I want to make this right," Nathan said when the music ended. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Eleanor studied her son's face, seeing genuine remorse for the first time. "Nathan, making this right doesn't mean getting your inheritance back. It means finding a way to contribute something meaningful to the world. You're a talented musician and educator. Use those gifts to help others instead of trying to steal from your mother." Thomas cleared his throat. "Mrs. Matthews has established a music education foundation with her estate. Nathan, if you're serious about making amends, there might be a place for you in that work, but you'll have to earn it." Eleanor walked to her desk and pulled out a small envelope. "Nathan, I've written you a letter explaining my decision. I hope someday you'll understand that I'm not punishing you. I'm trying to save you from becoming someone you'll hate." Nathan took the envelope with shaking hands. "What am I supposed to do now?" "The same way everyone else does," Eleanor replied. By contributing something meaningful to the world, by finding purpose beyond money." The letter contains information about a teaching position at an underfunded school in Bridgeport. "They need someone with your skills." Victoria grabbed Nathan's arm. "We're leaving. This is insane." As they reached the door, Eleanor called out, "Nathan, the job won't make you rich, but it might make you proud of yourself again. And if you take it, if you prove that you can contribute something positive to the world, then maybe we can begin to rebuild our relationship." After Nathan and Victoria left, Eleanor sat at her piano with Marcus beside her, playing duets that celebrated the music they both loved. The house filled with sound and joy, proving that Eleanor's life was far from over. In the days that followed, Eleanor began the process of reclaiming her life. She changed the locks on her house, updated her security system, and began planning the Music Scholarship Foundation that would honor Robert's memory and help young musicians achieve their dreams. Marcus helped her organize the tribute concert, which became a celebration of Eleanor's contributions to music education and her remarkable recovery. The event raised funds for the foundation and demonstrated that Eleanor's musical legacy was very much alive. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt truly free and purposeful. Eleanor's confrontation with Nathan and Victoria was just the beginning of her journey back to herself. The real transformation would come in the weeks and months that followed, as she learned to live fully with both her restored hearing and her reclaimed independence. Eleanor's decision to expose Nathan and Victoria's deception had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Within a week, the state attorney general's office had opened an investigation into financial elder abuse, and Nathan was required to return the money he had transferred from Eleanor's accounts without authorization. The story of Eleanor's restored hearing and her family's betrayal spread through Chicago's musical community, sparking conversations about elder abuse and the vulnerability of disabled individuals to financial exploitation. Eleanor found herself contacted by advocacy groups and legal organizations who wanted to use her story to educate others about protecting elderly family members. Eleanor's Music Scholarship Foundation was established within a month with an initial endowment of $8 million. The foundation would provide full scholarships to talented young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't prevent them from pursuing their musical dreams. The tribute concert was a resounding success, with former students, colleagues, and friends celebrating Eleanor's contributions to music education and her remarkable recovery. 1 year after the confrontation, Eleanor received an unexpected letter from Nathan. He had taken the teaching position at the underfunded school in Bridgeport and was writing to tell her about his students and the music program he was building from nothing. "I understand now what you tried to teach me about music," Nathan wrote. "It's not about perfection or personal achievement. It's about sharing something beautiful with others and helping them find their own voices. My students don't have much, but they have passion, and I'm learning to nurture that instead of demanding technical perfection." Eleanor was moved by the letter, but remained cautious. She agreed to meet with Nathan, but only at the school where he was teaching, and only if she could hear his students perform. The visit was transformative for both of them. Eleanor heard Nathan's students play simple pieces with the kind of joy and enthusiasm she remembered from her own early teaching days. She saw Nathan's patience with struggling students, his encouragement of their efforts, and his genuine pride in their progress. "You've found your true calling," Eleanor told Nathan after the performance. "This is the man I hoped you would become." They began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship based on Nathan's actions rather than his promises. Eleanor's life had been transformed in ways that went far beyond her restored hearing. At 66, she had rediscovered her love of music, her sense of purpose, and her capacity for joy. She performed regularly at small venues around Chicago, her playing infused with the emotion and depth that came from surviving betrayal and choosing forgiveness. Her relationship with Rosa had deepened into a true friendship, and she had formed new connections with Marcus and other musicians who valued her contributions to their art. Eleanor had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in money or property, but in the freedom to live authentically and the courage to stand up for what was right. Eleanor's story proved that disability doesn't equal vulnerability, and that age doesn't mean powerlessness. Her journey showed that sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us, but that we always have the power to choose our response. True strength comes from protecting our dignity, regardless of the cost. 2 years after her confrontation with Nathan and Victoria, Eleanor Matthews stood backstage at Symphony Center, preparing to perform with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for the first time in over a decade. The concert was a benefit for her Music Scholarship Foundation, and the audience was filled with scholarship recipients, their families and supporters of music education. The journey to this moment had been remarkable. Eleanor's Parkinson's disease had progressed slowly, but her restored hearing had given her the motivation to adapt her playing technique to accommodate the tremors. She had worked with a specialized physical therapist who helped her develop strategies for managing the symptoms while maintaining her musical abilities. As Eleanor walked onto the stage, she felt Robert's presence beside her. The music that had once been lost to her was now more beautiful than ever, enriched by the silence she had endured and the strength she had discovered. In the audience, she spotted Nathan in the third row, his face filled with pride and genuine love. Their relationship had been rebuilt slowly through his consistent actions rather than words. He had not only succeeded in his teaching position, but had started a music program for underprivileged children that had become a model for other schools. Victoria had not been part of the reconciliation. She had left Nathan 6 months after the confrontation, unable to accept that their financial schemes had failed. Nathan's divorce had been painful, but it had also freed him to become the person he was meant to be. Eleanor began playing Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23, her fingers finding the keys with the precision that had defined her career. The tremors were still there, but they had become part of her musical expression, adding a subtle humanity to her playing that audiences found deeply moving. During the performance, Eleanor caught sight of a young girl in the audience, Maria Santos, one of her scholarship recipients, who was hearing a live orchestra for the first time. The girl's face was radiant with wonder, and Eleanor remembered her own first experience with classical music as a child. After the performance, Eleanor stood at the piano, acknowledging the standing ovation with gratitude and humility. She had lost her hearing, regained it, lost her family's respect, and found her own strength. The journey had been painful, but it had led her to this moment surrounded by music, supported by genuine friends, and free to live life on her own terms. As the applause continued, Eleanor smiled, knowing that the greatest sound she had ever heard wasn't the music she was playing, but the sound of her own voice saying no to those who would diminish her and yes to the life she deserved to live. Later at the reception, Eleanor was approached by Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a researcher studying elder abuse in the disability community. Mrs. Matthews, your story has inspired our research and helped us understand how predators use disability as a weapon against their victims. Would you consider serving on our advisory board? Eleanor accepted immediately, knowing that her experience could help protect others from the betrayal she had endured. The evening concluded with an impromptu performance by Eleanor and Marcus, playing a duet they had worked on decades earlier. As their music filled the reception hall, Eleanor realized that her greatest legacy wasn't the money she would leave behind, but the lives she had touched through music and the courage she had shown in reclaiming her own life. The silence that had once isolated her had become the foundation for a life filled with authentic sound, genuine relationships, and the music that would always be her first love. She had learned that the most beautiful music comes not from perfection, but from the courage to continue playing even when the world tries to silence you.